The problem with being a financial crimes investigator for the U.S. Treasury Department is that your family never understands why you have unusual things in your home. Cash in unmarked bills. Documents with serial numbers. Evidence bags with chain of custody labels. To them, it all just looks like money and paperwork. To me, it's the difference between solving federal crimes and going to prison. I'm Jennifer Hayes, 32 years old, and I've worked for Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, for 7 years. I investigate money laundering, fraud, counterfeiting, and financial crimes that cross state and international borders. My security clearance is top secret. My cases involve tracking millions of dollars through shell corporations, offshore accounts, and criminal enterprises. And sometimes, my cases require me to temporarily store evidence at my residence while we prepare for raids and arrests. Which is how I ended up with $50,000 in marked bills sitting in my home safe 2 weeks ago. My family has never understood what I do. They know I work for the government. They know I investigate financial crimes. But to them, that sounds like I'm some kind of accountant who tracks down people who don't pay their taxes. My older brother Daniel runs a construction company that's been struggling for 3 years. My younger sister Beth is a schoolteacher drowning in student loans. My parents are retired on a fixed income, constantly stressed about money. And then there's me, unmarried, childless, living alone in a nice condo in Alexandria, Virginia. To them, I'm the one who has it easy because I have a government job with job security and benefits. They've never understood that my job involves putting away people who threaten the financial stability of the entire country. That I work 60-hour weeks tracking criminal enterprises. That I can't discuss my cases, my evidence, or the very real dangers involved in investigating people who move millions in illegal funds. 6 months ago, Daniel had started asking me for money. His construction business was failing. He'd lost 2 major contracts. Workers were threatening to quit over unpaid wages. Just a loan, he'd said over family dinner. $20,000. I'll pay you back in 6 months when this big contract comes through. Daniel, I can't, I'd said carefully. I don't have that kind of liquid capital available right now. That was technically true. My money was invested, tied up in retirement accounts, not sitting around for emergency loans. You work for the government, he protested. You make good money. You don't have kids or a mortgage. Where's all your money going? That's not really your business, I'd replied gently. But I'm not in a position to loan you that amount right now. Mom had frowned. Jennifer, your brother is in trouble. Family helps family. I understand that. But I genuinely don't have $20,000 to give him right now. Dad had shaken his head, disappointed. When did you become so selfish? I'd let it go. What else could I do? I couldn't explain that my savings were modest because I'd spent the last 2 years helping Beth pay off her student loans. Anonymously through a third party, because she would have refused if she'd known it was me. I couldn't tell them about the financial support I'd been quietly providing Mom and Dad for their medical expenses. I definitely couldn't tell them that most of my mental energy went into hunting down criminals who would kill to protect their illegal fortunes. So I just accepted being the selfish sister and moved on. 3 weeks ago, I'd been assigned to a major case. Operation Cascade. A massive money laundering investigation involving a network of car dealerships that were fronts for washing drug money. $12 million had moved through these businesses over 2 years, with sophisticated layering techniques that took us months to unravel. We were preparing for coordinated raids. Multiple locations. Dozens of arrests. But we needed evidence. Specifically, we needed marked bills from a controlled buy that would prove the connection between the drug money and the legitimate businesses. My supervisor, Agent Martinez, had called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Hayes, we need you to hold evidence at your secure residence for 72 hours. The evidence room is being renovated and we can't risk any chain of custody issues this close to the raids. What kind of evidence? 50,000 in marked bills. Currency used in the controlled buy last week. We need it secured until Friday when the raids execute. I'd hesitated. My residence is approved for evidence storage? You completed the certification last year. Your safe meets requirements. This is standard procedure. We've got 3 other agents holding evidence at their homes this week while the renovation completes. Understood. When do you need me to take custody? Today. 4 p.m. Sign the transfer logs and secure it until Friday morning. The raids execute at 6 a.m., and we'll need that evidence in court by noon. So I'd taken custody of $50,000 in marked bills. Each bill cataloged, serial numbers recorded, placed in sealed evidence bags with tamper-proof tags. I'd signed chain of custody documents. I'd transported it to my condo, placed it in my certified safe and set my security system. Standard procedure. I'd done it half a dozen times before with various evidence. But this time Thanksgiving was on Thursday. And my family wanted to host Thanksgiving at my place. I'd tried to decline. Why don't we do it at Mom and Dad's like usual? Your place is bigger, Beth had said. And it's in the middle, easier for everyone to get to. Plus your kitchen is nicer, Mom had added. We could really spread out. I'd been stuck. Saying no would have caused questions, hurt feelings, more accusations of selfishness. And I'd rationalized that the evidence was secured in my safe in my bedroom behind a locked door. The family would be in the living room and kitchen. There was no way they'd access it. So I'd agreed. Thursday morning I'd woken early to start prep. The turkey, the sides, the endless cooking that Thanksgiving required. My safe was locked in my bedroom closet. The bedroom door was locked. The evidence was secure. The family started arriving at noon. Mom and Dad first, then Beth with her boyfriend, then Daniel with his wife Melissa and their 2 kids. Everyone brought dishes, wine, stories about their weeks. I'd been genuinely enjoying it. The stress of the case had been wearing on me, and it was nice to have family around, even if they didn't understand my life. The kids were playing. The food smelled amazing. For a few hours I could just be Jennifer, the sister and daughter, not Special Agent Hayes tracking down millions in laundered money. We'd sat down for dinner at 3 p.m. Turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce. The whole traditional spread. Conversation flowed. Daniel talked about a potential new contract. Beth discussed her students. Mom and Dad reminisced about past Thanksgivings. Then halfway through the meal Daniel had said something that made my blood freeze. So, Jenny, interesting thing. I was looking for your bathroom earlier and accidentally opened your bedroom door instead. My fork had stopped midway to my mouth. My bedroom door was locked. Yeah, the lock's kind of loose. Popped open when I turned the handle. Anyway, I noticed your closet door was open and I saw your safe. The room had suddenly felt very small. You went into my bedroom? After finding the door locked. By accident, he'd said defensively. But yeah, I saw the safe. Big one. Professional grade. Made me curious about what you keep in there. None of your business, I'd said quietly. That door was locked for a reason, Daniel. Mom had frowned. Jennifer, don't be rude. Your brother was just making conversation. The conversation involves him entering my locked bedroom without permission and commenting on my personal property. Family doesn't need permission, Dad had said. What are you hiding that you're so defensive about? I'd taken a breath, trying to stay calm. I'm not hiding anything. I'm setting appropriate boundaries. My bedroom was locked. That should have been respected. Daniel had shrugged. Whatever. I'm just saying that's a serious safe. Government issue looks like. What's in there? Gold bars? Secret documents? It's none of your concern. Come on, he'd pressed. You're being weird about this. What's in the safe, Jenny? Daniel, drop it. But he hadn't dropped it. And that's when everything had gone wrong. Actually, Daniel had said, exchanging a glance with Melissa, I already know what's in the safe. My heart had stopped. What did you do? The safe code is your birthday, he'd continued. Same code you've used for everything since we were kids. Mom's birthday, then Dad's, then mine. Took me 3 tries. The room had started spinning. You opened my safe? We needed the cash more than you, Dad had said, and I'd realized he was part of this too. Found $50,000 in your safe. We borrowed it, Daniel had said quickly. Just temporarily. My business is going under, Jenny. I'm about to lose everything. I needed that money. I'll pay you back. Real family shares everything, Mom had added, like she was teaching me a lesson in basic morality. I'd stood up, chair scraping loudly. You took money from my safe? When? Yesterday, Melissa had admitted. Daniel told me about seeing it. We came back while you were at work. We knew where your spare key was. All of you. I'd looked around the table. Who else was involved? Just us, Dad had said. Daniel told us about the money. We talked it over as a family. You weren't going to help your brother, so we helped him ourselves. With my money. With cash you had sitting in a safe, Dad had corrected. Not invested, not in the bank. Just sitting there. You clearly didn't need it immediately. Beth had looked uncomfortable. I didn't know about this, she'd said quietly. This is the first I'm hearing of it. At least one person had boundaries. You need to give it back, I'd said, voice shaking. Right now. All of it. We can't, Daniel had said. I already used it. Paid my workers, covered business expenses, deposited most of it to keep the company afloat. It's gone. It's not gone, Melissa had added. It's invested in Daniel's business. Once he gets the next contract, he'll pay you back with interest. I'd pulled out my phone with trembling hands. You don't understand what you've done. We borrowed money from you, Daniel had said defensively. Yeah, without asking, but families do that. Stop being so dramatic. I'd opened my encrypted messaging app and sent an emergency code to Agent Martinez. Evidence compromised. Theft confirmed. Need immediate response team. The reply had come back in seconds. Location. Current status of suspects. My parents' house. No, wait. My house. With my family. Jesus Christ. Jennifer, who are you texting? Mom had asked. We're having a family dinner. I typed. My residence. Suspects are family members. Still on scene. Requesting guidance. The response. Secure the scene. Teams en route. 88 minutes. Do not let anyone leave. Nobody move, I'd said quietly. Nobody leaves this table. Excuse me. Dad had laughed. You don't give us orders. The money you took, I'd said carefully, wasn't mine. The laughter had died. What do you mean? Daniel had asked slowly. I mean, that was federal evidence. Marked bills from an active money laundering investigation. Every bill is cataloged with serial numbers. Every bill is tagged. And every single one is critical evidence in a case involving $12 million in drug money. The color had drained from Daniel's face. You're joking. I'm a financial crimes investigator for the U.S. Treasury Department. That money was in my custody as part of an official investigation. You stole federal evidence. You broke the chain of custody on a major case. And if you deposited that money, you just put marked bills into the banking system, which means we can track exactly where it went and what you did with it. Oh my God, Melissa had whispered. I need to know exactly what you did with that money, I'd said. Right now. Every detail. Where did it go? I paid my workers, Daniel had stammered. Cash payments. About $20,000. The rest. I deposited it to the business account. Yesterday afternoon. Which bank? Virginia Community Bank. The branch on Jefferson Street. I typed that information to Martinez. His response. Bank being contacted now. Transaction freeze in progress. Treasury enforcement teams en route. You're serious, Dad had said, realization dawning. That was real evidence? Yes. From an active case. With raids executing tomorrow morning. And now I have to report that $50,000 in critical evidence was stolen by my family members who broke into my safe and took it. We didn't know. Mom had protested. How were we supposed to know? Maybe by respecting that my bedroom door was locked? By not breaking into my safe? By not taking money that didn't belong to you? My voice had risen. You committed theft. Breaking and entering. Tampering with federal evidence. Obstruction of justice. Those are felonies. Plural. Beth's boyfriend had stood up. I think we should go. We weren't involved in this. Nobody leaves, I'd said firmly. Treasury enforcement teams are already en route. If you try to leave, that's fleeing the scene of a federal crime. Jennifer, you can't be serious about this, Dad had said. We're your family. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft. And now I have to explain to my supervisor and a federal judge how evidence in my custody was compromised because my family broke into my safe. Daniel had put his head in his hands. My business is finished. I'm going to prison. Yes, I'd said quietly. You probably are. That's when we'd heard the vehicles outside. Multiple vehicles arriving fast with sirens briefly whooping. The kids had started crying. Melissa had gone pale. Mom had grabbed Dad's hand. I'd walked to the door and opened it. 6 agents in Treasury enforcement jackets stood outside, hands near their weapons. Special Agent Hayes? The lead agent had asked. Yes. The suspects are inside. Family members. They've confessed to taking the evidence and depositing most of it in a bank account. I have the bank information. How much did they take? All of it. 50,000. About 20 went to cash payments. 30 was deposited yesterday. The agent had whistle blow. That's going to be a nightmare to recover. Is the chain of custody completely broken? Yes. Multiple unauthorized persons accessed the evidence. Unknown time out of custody. Commingling with other funds. The bills are probably already dispersed through multiple transactions. The case. Likely compromised. We'll need to discuss with the prosecution team, but without clean chain of custody on the buy money. I trailed off. We both knew what it meant. Months of work potentially ruined. The agents had entered my condo. The Thanksgiving meal sat half-eaten on the table. A Norman Rockwell painting turned into a crime scene. We need statements from everyone, the lead agent had announced. You're all witnesses and potential suspects in a federal evidence tampering case. Mom had started crying. We didn't tamper with anything. We just borrowed money. You stole federal evidence, the agent had corrected. That's a federal crime. Who was involved in the theft? Just Daniel, Melissa, and my parents, I'd said. Beth and her boyfriend weren't involved or aware. They can go, but we'll need their contact information for statements. Beth had grabbed her boyfriend's hand and practically run from the condo. I didn't blame her. The agents had separated Daniel, Melissa, and my parents. Standard procedure for witness interviews. Each was questioned separately about what they'd done, what they'd known, where the money had gone. I'd sat in my kitchen with Agent Martinez, who'd arrived with the second wave of enforcement. Walk me through your security procedures, he'd said. I'd explained everything. The evidence transfer, the certified safe, the locked bedroom. I'd explained about Thanksgiving, about my decision to host, about my brother's unauthorized entry to my bedroom. And they had your spare key? Yes. I didn't know they knew where it was. Safe combination? Family birthdays. I know, it's a stupid combination. I thought being in my locked apartment was sufficient. Martinez had rubbed his face. Hayes, this isn't your fault. You followed procedure. The safe was certified, the evidence was secured. You had no reason to expect family members would commit breaking and entering. But they did. And now the case is compromised. Maybe. The bills are marked, we can track them. If your brother deposited 30,000, we can freeze that account, trace the transactions, potentially recover most of it. The 20 in cash payments is trickier, but we can identify the recipients and recover the bills. It's not ideal, but it might not be case ending. And my family? He'd looked at me seriously. They're going to be arrested. Federal charges. This isn't something we can sweep under the rug, Hayes. They stole evidence in an active investigation. That's mandatory prosecution. I know. Are you okay with that? I'd thought about Daniel's struggling business. About my parents' limited retirement income. About the legal fees they'd face, the criminal records, the consequences that would follow them forever. And then I'd thought about the $12 million in drug money we were trying to trace. About the criminal enterprise we were trying to dismantle. About the precedent it would set if federal agents' family members could steal evidence without consequences. Yes, I'd said. I'm okay with that. The interviews had taken 4 hours. By the time the agents finished, it was nearly midnight. The Thanksgiving dinner had long since gone cold. Daniel, Melissa, and my parents were arrested and taken into federal custody. Charges included theft of government property, tampering with evidence, and obstruction of justice. Bail was set at $100,000 each. Money none of them had. I'd sat alone in my condo that night looking at the ruined Thanksgiving dinner and cried for the first time in years. The next morning, the raids on Operation Cascade had executed as planned. But without the clean chain of custody on the marked bills, the prosecution was more complicated. We could still trace the money, still prove the laundering scheme, but the defense attorneys would have a field day with the compromised evidence. Agent Martinez had pulled me aside after the morning briefing. The good news is we've recovered about 42,000 of the 50. Your brother's bank account was frozen before he could spend most of it. We've identified most of the workers who received cash payments and recovered those bills. 8,000 is still unaccounted for, but we're working on it. What about the case? Prosecution thinks they can work with it. The marked bills are documented evidence of commingling, which actually helps prove the money laundering charge. It's not what we wanted, but it's not case-ending. The defense will argue chain of custody issues, but we've got enough other evidence to make the charges stick. And my family? Your brother and sister-in-law are facing 5 to 7 years. Your parents, given their age and lack of criminal history, are looking at reduced charges, possibly probation and restitution. But they all need lawyers. Good ones. I'd nodded numbly. Hayes, take some time off. This is trauma. Family arrest situations are brutal. I'm fine. You're not fine. Nobody's fine after arresting their own parents. Take a week. See the department therapist. That's an order, not a suggestion. So I'd taken the week. But I hadn't seen the therapist, not yet. I'd spent 7 days in my condo, avoiding calls from extended family members demanding to know how I could do this, how I could let my parents be arrested, how I could be so heartless. Beth had come by on day 3. She'd hugged me without speaking, then left a casserole and some wine. The only family member who understood that I hadn't had a choice. Daniel's lawyer had called on day 5. Ms. Hayes, I'm representing your brother. He's willing to take a plea deal, reduce charges in exchange for full cooperation and restitution. Talk to the prosecution, I'd said. I'm not involved in plea negotiations. He wanted me to tell you he's sorry. He didn't understand what he was taking. That doesn't make it not theft. I know. But he wanted you to know. I'd hung up without responding. Mom had called from jail on day 6, collect call from the detention center. I'd almost declined it, but curiosity had won. Jennifer, please, she'd said, voice breaking. Help us. Talk to your boss. Tell them we didn't understand. You understood enough to know it was theft, I'd replied. You understood enough to plan it, break into my apartment, open my safe and take money that wasn't yours. We thought it was yours. It was in a government-certified safe in the home of a federal agent. What did you think it was for? We needed the money, she'd sobbed. Daniel's business is his whole life. We were trying to save him. By stealing federal evidence. Mom, do you understand what you've done? Not just to yourselves but to my case? To my career? I'm under investigation now because evidence in my custody was compromised. We didn't think. Exactly. You didn't think. You saw money and took it. And now you're in jail facing felony charges. Please, Jennifer. We're your parents. And I'm a federal agent who took an oath. That oath doesn't have an exception for family members. She'd cried until the call time expired. 3 weeks later, I sat in the prosecution's office while they outlined the plea deals. Daniel would plead guilty to theft of government property and obstruction of justice. 42 months in federal prison followed by 3 years supervised release, and full restitution of $50,000 plus investigation costs. Melissa would plead guilty to conspiracy and accessory charges. 24 months in prison, supervised release and joint restitution. Mom and Dad, given their age and minimal involvement, would plead guilty to misdemeanor theft charges. No prison time but 3 years probation, $10,000 fines each and restitution payments. What about the case? I'd asked. Operation Cascade? Complicated but viable, the prosecutor had said. The defense is arguing chain of custody issues, but we're using the marked bills your family spent as evidence of money laundering, showing how easily drug money integrates into legitimate commerce. It's actually strengthening part of our argument. So my family's crime helped the case? In a weird way, yes. Doesn't excuse what they did, but there's irony there. I'd left that meeting feeling hollow. My family had committed crimes that both hurt and helped the case. They'd face years in prison or probation. And I'd been the one to report them, knowing exactly what would happen. The mandatory therapy sessions started that week. The department psychologist had specialized in law enforcement family trauma. How are you sleeping? She'd asked in our first session. Not well. Nightmares? No. Just lying awake thinking about Thanksgiving dinner. Wondering if I should have done something differently. Like what? Not hosted. Kept the evidence at the office somehow. Better safe combination. Hidden the safe. Something. You followed proper procedures. Your family committed crimes. That's not your fault. They're still going to prison because I reported them. They're going to prison because they stole federal evidence. You did your job. Would you rather have covered it up? No, I'd said immediately. But I wish it hadn't happened at all. That's fair. But it did happen. And now you're dealing with consequences. Professional, personal, emotional. That's what we're here to work through. The sessions helped, eventually. Learning to separate my guilt from my responsibility. Understanding that I could grieve my family relationships while still believing I'd done the right thing. 4 months after Thanksgiving, Daniel and Melissa were sentenced. I attended the sentencing hearing. The prosecutor had asked me to as the investigating agent. The judge had been stern. Mr. Chin, you stole evidence from a federal investigation. You compromised a major case involving millions of dollars in drug money. The fact that your sister is a federal agent makes this worse, not better. You violated her trust and her professional responsibilities. Do you understand the severity of what you've done? Yes, Your Honor, Daniel had said quietly. I destroyed my business, my marriage, my family, and my sister's trust. All for money I spent in 2 days. I understand. Mrs. Chin, you participated willingly in this theft. You helped plan it and execute it. Do you have anything to say? Just that I'm sorry, Melissa had whispered. And that Jennifer tried to help us legally. We should have listened. The judge had handed down the agreed sentences. 42 months for Daniel, 24 for Melissa. They'd report to their designated facilities within 30 days. Mom and Dad had been sentenced separately, receiving their probation and fines with stern warnings about the consequences of violating probation. After the hearing, Daniel had approached me in the hallway. A marshal stood nearby. He was technically still in custody. Jenny, I don't expect forgiveness, he'd said. But I want you to know I understand now. What you do matters. The rules matter. And I'm sorry I didn't respect that before. Okay, I'd said simply. Will you visit? When I'm in prison? I'd thought about it. Really thought about it. I don't know, I'd finally said. Maybe. Eventually. But right now I need space. He'd nodded, eyes wet. I understand. Take care of yourself, Jenny. They'd led him away. Beth had found me in the parking lot afterward. You okay? Not really. Yeah. Me neither. She put her arm around my shoulders. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. I'm sorry it had to be you who did it. Thanks. Mom and Dad are furious with you. They think you should have covered for them. I know. I told them they were wrong. That they committed crimes and you did your job. I don't think they want to hear it, but it's true. Doesn't make it easier. No, Beth had agreed. It doesn't. But it's still true. 6 months after Thanksgiving, Operation Cascade concluded with guilty verdicts on all major charges. 12 defendants convicted of money laundering, fraud, and racketeering. The marked bills my family had stolen and spent became evidence that helped demonstrate how drug money moved through legitimate channels. The judge in that case had actually referenced my family's theft in his ruling. The fact that federal evidence could be stolen and immediately integrated into normal commerce demonstrates the very money laundering techniques this case prosecutes. Agent Martinez had brought me the news. Your family inadvertently helped convict the people we were investigating. That's got to feel complicated. Everything about this feels complicated. How are you holding up? Day by day. Therapy helps. Time helps. But I still wake up sometimes thinking about that Thanksgiving dinner. The one where you arrested your parents? Yeah. That one. He'd smiled sadly. For what it's worth, Hayes, you handled an impossible situation with integrity. Not many agents could have made that call. Didn't feel like I had a choice. You didn't. But you still made it. That takes courage. A year after Thanksgiving, I visited Daniel in federal prison in West Virginia. Beth came with me, moral support. Daniel looked older, thinner. Prison had been hard on him, but he was surviving. Thanks for coming, he'd said when we sat down in the visiting room. Wasn't sure I would, I'd admitted. But Beth convinced me. I'm glad she did. He'd looked at me carefully. You look good. Better than at the sentencing. Therapy. Time. Accepting that I can't change what happened. I wrote you letters, he'd said. Never sent them. Didn't think you'd want to hear from me. Probably wouldn't have read them right away, I'd agreed. But maybe eventually. I've had a lot of time to think in here. About what I did. Why I did it. And I realized. I always resented you a little. You had the stable government job, the security, the success. I was struggling with the business, always stressed about money. And I took that out on you by not respecting your boundaries. Yeah. You did. I'm sorry. For all of it. For breaking into your safe, for stealing the money, for not listening to you about the loan, for all the years I dismissed what you do. You were right to turn me in. I committed crimes. I deserved the consequences. It was what I'd needed to hear for a year. But hearing it didn't magically fix everything. I appreciate that, I'd said carefully. But we're not okay, Daniel. Maybe someday, but not yet. I know. I just wanted you to know I get it now. What you did was right. I'm not angry anymore. Good. Because I'd do it again if I had to. He'd smiled slightly. I believe you. That's actually comforting in a weird way. Knowing you have principles you won't compromise, even for family. We talked for the rest of the visit. Carefully neutral topics about Beth's teaching, about my work, what I could discuss. About his plans for after release. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Beginning, maybe. Mom and Dad never came around. They completed their probation, paid their fines and restitution, but they never forgave me for not covering for them. The last time I'd spoken to Dad, he'd said, "You chose your job over your family." I don't know if I can forgive that. I'd replied, I chose my oath over protecting criminals. Even if those criminals were family. And I can live with that. We hadn't spoken since. Beth and I stayed close. She was the only family member who fully understood that I'd been in an impossible position and had chosen the only ethical path available. 2 years after Thanksgiving, I received a promotion. Supervisory Special Agent, leading a team of financial crimes investigators. The promotion included a commendation for exceptional integrity in the face of personal hardship. The commendation cited my handling of the evidence theft, my immediate reporting, my cooperation with the investigation. It praised my commitment to duty even when that duty required tremendous personal sacrifice. I kept the commendation in my desk drawer, not displayed. Some achievements feel too complicated to celebrate. My therapist asked me once if I regretted what I'd done. No, I'd said. But I regret that it had to happen. I regret that my family put me in that position. I regret that doing the right thing cost me most of my family relationships. But not the choice itself. Not the choice itself. If I'd covered it up, I'd have violated my oath, compromised an investigation, and become a criminal myself. That's not who I am. Even if it means being alone. I'd thought about that. Really thought about it. Even then, I'd said. Because integrity isn't about doing the right thing when it's easy. It's about doing the right thing when it costs you everything. And it had cost me nearly everything. But I still had my integrity. My career. My self-respect. The knowledge that when tested I'd chosen principle over comfort, duty over family loyalty, justice over personal cost. Some people would say that makes me cold. Heartless. That I chose wrong. But somewhere 12 people were in prison for money laundering because Operation Cascade succeeded. Millions in drug money had been seized. A criminal enterprise had been dismantled. And none of that would have happened if I'd covered up my family's theft. So yes, I'd lost my family. But I'd kept my integrity. And in the end, that was the only choice I could live with. Even if it meant living with it alone.
I straightened my simple black dress, checking my reflection in the hallway mirror of my parents' suburban home. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry, just clean, professional lines and comfortable shoes. The kind of outfit you'd expect from someone who spent their days managing warehouse logistics. Safia. Mom's voice carried from the dining room. Everyone's waiting. Everyone meant my brother Michael, the successful real estate developer, his wife Amanda with her family money and country club membership, and my parents' carefully curated collection of family friends, all gathered to celebrate Dad's retirement from his mid-level banking job. I took a deep breath, remembering why I'd agreed to come tonight. 10 years of condescension, of subtle jabs about my career choices, of being the family disappointment. It was all about to change. They just didn't know it yet. "There she is," Mom said as I entered, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We were just telling the Andersons about Michael's new development project. The luxury condos." Michael lounged in his chair, Rolex catching the light. "Breaking ground next month. Just need that construction loan to finalize." I nodded, taking my seat at the far end of the table, my usual spot, away from the important conversations. A text buzzed on my phone. "All set for tomorrow, boss. Banks open at 9. "How's your job, Sophia?" Mrs. Anderson asked, clearly struggling to remember what I did. Before I could answer, Mom jumped in. "Oh, Sophia's between things right now, still figuring out her path." "Actually," I started. She manages a warehouse." Michael interrupted with a smirk. "Inventory and shipping. Very exciting stuff." The table rippled with polite murmurs and quickly changed subjects. I sipped my water, watching Mom shoot me a warning look. "Don't embarrass us," that look said. "Know your place." If they only knew. 10 years ago, fresh out of college with my logistics degree, I'd taken a job as an assistant manager at Global Freight Solutions. While Michael was busy partying through business school, I was learning every aspect of the supply chain industry. While he networked at cocktail parties, I built relationships with truck drivers, customs agents, and dock workers, the people who actually made global commerce possible. "Did you hear?" Amanda's voice cut through my thoughts. "The Richardsons' daughter just made junior partner at her law firm. Wasn't she in your class, Sophia?" "She was," I replied calmly. "Jessica's doing well." "See," Mom seized the opening. "It's not too late to go back to school, honey. Law school, maybe an MBA, something respectable." I set down my fork. "I like my job, Mom." "Sweetheart," Dad joined in, his tone patronizing. "You're too smart to spend your life in a warehouse." Even that nice Martinez boy from church became a dentist. The nice Martinez boy had also asked me out last month, then ghosted me after learning what I did for a living. Is loss. "Speaking of careers," Michael said, "Amanda and I are looking at vacation homes in Aspen. Once this development deal goes through, we'll finally be able to afford." "If it goes through," I murmured. The table went quiet. "What's that supposed to mean?" Michael demanded. I shrugged. "Construction loans are tough right now. Banks are tightening requirements, especially for luxury developments. And you'd know this because—" Amanda's voice dripped with disdain. "Just something I heard at work." Mom stood abruptly. "Sophia, help me with dessert." In the kitchen, she rounded on me. "What are you doing?" "Your brother has important people at this dinner. People who could help your career if you just—" "Just what, Mom? Pretend to be something I'm not." "Don't mention your pathetic job again," she hissed. "It's embarrassing enough having to explain to our friends why you waste your potential in some warehouse." I thought about the documents waiting in my briefcase, about the meetings scheduled for tomorrow, about the empire I'd built while they weren't paying attention. "Who wants a warehouse manager in the family?" Michael called from the dining room, loud enough to carry. "Probably can't even afford the maintenance fees at my new development." I walked back in, calm settling over me like a shield. "You're right, probably can't. But tomorrow might bring surprises." "What's that supposed to mean?" Mom demanded. I smiled. Just that things aren't always what they seem. They had no idea how true that was. That assistant manager position, I'd used it to learn every flaw, every inefficiency in the global supply chain. While my bosses focused on quarterly reports, I developed a revolutionary logistics software system. When they passed me over for promotion, I quit and started my own company. Atlas Logistics began in my garage apartment, just me and a laptop. But I understood something my family never had. Real power isn't in flashy developments or country club memberships. It's in controlling how things move. Every product, every material, every component has to get from point A to point B. I made that process seamless. Major manufacturers noticed. Tech companies noticed. Anyone who needed reliable, efficient shipping became my client. Atlas grew silently, deliberately, until we controlled logistics for half the country's major retailers. I kept my old warehouse job title, working from the front lines, seeing opportunities others missed. The office politics and backstabbing that consumed my brother's world meant nothing in mine. I built something real. And tomorrow, when Michael's loan application crossed my desk, because yes, I owned the logistics company that the bank used to verify supply chain stability for construction projects, everything would change. More wine, Sophia. Amanda offered condescendingly. Drown your sorrows about that warehouse? I declined politely. Early meeting tomorrow. Oh, counting boxes. Michael laughed at his own joke. Something like that. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of subtle digs and pointed comments. Mom kept trying to set me up with successful men from church. Dad hinted at job openings at his bank. Michael bragged about his development plans. I let them talk. In my car later that night, I called my assistant. Everything ready for tomorrow? Yes, Ms. Martinez. The bank's due diligence team will discover that the proposed construction site has severe supply chain vulnerabilities. Atlas Logistics' report will effectively kill the loan. Unless they contract exclusively with us for all materials transport at premium rates. I smiled. And who owns Atlas Logistics? On paper, a dozen shell companies. In reality, you're the sole owner and CEO. Worth approximately $300 million as of last quarter. Tomorrow, my family would learn that their embarrassing warehouse manager controlled one of the largest logistics networks in the country. That Michael's success or failure depended entirely on my company's approval. That every snide comment, every dismissive gesture had been directed at someone who could buy and sell their whole world 10 times over. But tonight, I drove home to my modest apartment above the warehouse. Tomorrow would come soon enough. A text from Mom. Hope you'll think about what we discussed. Law school applications are still open for spring. I didn't reply. The numbers in my company's books would reply for me soon enough. The bank's conference room had the sterile, polished feel of every financial institution I'd ever visited. But today, sitting quietly in the corner while Michael presented his development proposal, I savored every detail. As you can see, Michael gestured to his sleek slides. The pinnacle at Highland Park will redefine luxury living in our city. 40 stories, premium amenities, spectacular views. I watched the loan committee's faces. 5 senior bankers who'd evaluate the $50 million construction loan application. Mom and Dad sat near Michael, beaming with pride. They'd called in favors to get this meeting at the prestigious First National. Very impressive, Mr. Martinez, the committee chair said. However, we have some concerns about supply chain stability. In today's market. Oh, that's all arranged, Michael waved dismissively. We've got contracts with multiple suppliers. Actually, a new voice spoke up. That's why I'm here. Everyone turned as Thomas Bradford, CEO of First National Bank, walked in. My parents' eyes widened. The CEO himself rarely attended loan committees. Tom, Dad stood, eager to leverage his old banking connection. What a pleasant surprise. Bradford nodded politely, but kept his eyes on his tablet. We've received some concerning reports about the project's logistics viability. According to Atlas Logistics, the color drained from Michael's face. Atlas was the gold standard in supply chain analysis. Their reports could make or break major projects. Atlas, he stammered. But they're just a logistics company. Surely the bank doesn't. Atlas Logistics, Bradford continued, controls 80% of construction material transport in this region. Their analysis suggests severe supply chain vulnerabilities at the proposed site. Without their support, material costs could increase by 40%. Michael's perfect presentation was crumbling. But we can find other transport companies. In theory, yes. In practice, Atlas has exclusive contracts with most major suppliers. They've revolutionized the industry. Very impressive company. Very private. I shifted in my seat, enjoying the show. What do you suggest? Mom asked anxiously. Well, Bradford checked his notes. Atlas has indicated they might consider a premium service contract. If you're interested, their CEO is actually here today. Michael looked around frantically. Here? Where? I stood up slowly, smoothing my simple black dress. Right here. The silence was absolute. No, Michael whispered. Yes, Bradford smiled. Ms. Martinez has been one of our most valuable clients for years. Atlas Logistics holds significant accounts with us. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad seemed to age 10 years in 10 seconds. Michael just stared, his expensive suit suddenly seeming like a child's costume. You, he managed finally. You're Atlas. Founded it 10 years ago, I said calmly, while managing that embarrassing warehouse job. But you never said anything. All those times you mocked my career, dismissed my potential, treated me like the family failure. I pulled out my own tablet. Let's talk about those supply chain vulnerabilities. For the next hour, I methodically outlined every flaw in Michael's logistics plan, the impossible delivery schedules, the unrealistic cost projections, the bottlenecks he'd never considered. This is absurd, he finally exploded. You're doing this to sabotage me. No, I corrected. I'm doing my job. The same job you've ridiculed for years. Sophia, Mom tried, her voice shaking. Surely you can help your brother? Family should. Families should support each other. I cut in. Not tear each other down. Not shame someone for their choices. Not decide someone's worth based on appearances. Bradford cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss Atlas' premium service option. I pulled up the contract. Triple our standard rates. Exclusive 5-year commitment. Non-negotiable. Triple? Michael choked. That would eat most of our profit margin. Welcome to the real world of logistics, brother, where actual work matters more than flashy presentations. Dad finally spoke up. All this time, while we were pushing you to change careers, I was building an empire. I finished. One warehouse at a time. One contract at a time. One innovation at a time. The loan committee shifted uncomfortably. Without Atlas's support, the project was effectively dead. Michael knew it. My parents knew it. Everyone in that room knew it. The premium contract, Michael said finally, defeated. Can we see the terms? I sent the document to his tablet. As he read, his face went through a fascinating range of emotions. Shock at the costs, anger at the conditions, and finally, devastating realization at the signature block. This has to be approved by the CEO personally. That's right. I smiled. That would be me. The warehouse manager you're so ashamed of. Mom started to cry quietly. Dad stared at his hands. The loan committee tried to look anywhere but at our family drama. Mr. Bradford, I said, standing. I believe we're done here. Unless my brother would like to revise his proposal. I'll need time to recalculate, Michael mumbled. As I walked out, Bradford fell into step beside me. That was rather dramatic. Sometimes lessons need to be dramatic to stick. And the premium contract. Will you actually enforce those rates? I thought about years of snide comments, of dismissive gestures, of being the family embarrassment. That depends, I said, on what I hear at the next family dinner. In the elevator, my phone buzzed with messages. Mom begging me to reconsider. Dad asking to meet. Michael's wife, Amanda, suddenly very interested in getting coffee. But the message that caught my eye was from our warehouse supervisor. Loading dock needs approval on the Johnson shipment, boss. I smiled. Time to get back to my embarrassing job. The news spread through our social circle like wildfire. Sophie Martinez, the warehouse manager, was actually a business mogul. My parents' phones exploded with calls from friends suddenly eager to reconnect with their successful daughter. I ignored it all, focusing on what I'd always focused on: running my company. Ms. Martinez, my assistant Sarah, called through the intercom. Your mother's here. Again. It had been 2 weeks since the bank meeting. 2 weeks of avoided calls and declined invitations. But I couldn't hide forever. Send her in. Mom looked different, smaller somehow, without her usual perfectly coordinated outfit and immaculate makeup. She clutched her purse like a shield. This is where you work, she asked, looking around my office. Not the corner warehouse office she'd imagined. Instead, the entire top floor of downtown's most prestigious building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, including the empty lot where Michael's development should have been rising. This is one of my offices, I replied. I'd prefer being at the warehouses, where the real work happens. Why didn't you tell us? The question burst out of her. All these years, we thought. You thought what you wanted to think, Mom. You saw a warehouse manager and decided that wasn't good enough. Never asked what I actually did. Never showed interest in my work. We were worried about you. Living in that tiny apartment, working those long hours. That apartment is above our main distribution center. I lived there because I wanted to, not because I had to. I gestured to the city view. I could have bought this building years ago, but flash and status. That was never my goal. She sank into a chair, looking lost. Your father hasn't slept since we found out. He keeps talking about all the times he tried to get you entry-level bank jobs, thinking he was helping. And Michael? He's struggling. The development deal fell through completely. No other logistics company will touch it after Atlas declined. I pulled up my tablet, showing her Atlas's real-time operations map. Thousands of dots moving across the country, trucks, ships, planes, all coordinated through our systems. This is what I built, Mom. While you were embarrassed by my job, I was revolutionizing how goods move around the world. While you were trying to set me up with dentists and lawyers, I was building something that actually matters. I'm so sorry, she whispered. We were so wrong. A knock interrupted us. Sarah again. Sorry, Ms. Martinez, but we have a situation at the Port of Seattle. Major weather delay, affecting the tech corridor shipments. Give me a minute. I turned back to Mom. This is why I love my job. Real problems, real solutions, not just status and appearances. She watched in silence as I coordinated with our port managers, rerouting shipments through alternate channels, adjusting schedules in real time. Millions of dollars of goods, thousands of jobs, all depending on quick, smart decisions. You're amazing at this, she said finally. I always was. You just never saw it. Another knock. This time Michael, looking uncomfortable in a cheap suit. Sophia, He stopped, seeing Mom. Oh, I can come back. Stay, I said. Family meeting might as well be now. He sat heavily, avoiding my eyes. I lost everything, he admitted. The development deal, my investors, even Amanda. She left. Says she didn't marry a failure. He laughed bitterly. Funny, that's how we treated you all these years. Michael, I began, but he cut me off. No, let me finish. I was so busy playing big shot developer, I never actually learned the business. Not like you did. You started from the ground up, learned every detail, built something real. Mom wiped her eyes. We were such snobs. All that time bragging about Michael's projects. And our real success story was right there, managing warehouses. My phone buzzed. Dad, requesting access from lobby security. Send him up, I told Sarah. When Dad walked in, the family circle was complete. He looked older, tired, but something else too, proud, maybe for the first time, of what I'd actually achieved. I drove by the warehouse today, he said quietly. Your warehouse. Saw the trucks lined up, everything running like clockwork. Got me thinking about all those dinners where we treated you like. He trailed off. Like an embarrassment, I finished. He nodded sadly. While you were building an empire, we were measuring success by country club memberships. I've never been more wrong about anything in my life. I pulled up another screen. The contract Michael had refused at the bank. The premium rates, I said, were never real. That was just a lesson in humility. Michael's head snapped up. What? Atlas will support your development. Standard rates. But I held up a hand as hope flooded his face. You're going to learn this business from the ground up, starting in our warehouse management training program. You mean 6 months loading trucks, learning logistics, understanding how things actually work. No shortcuts, no fancy titles, just real work. I'll do it, he said immediately. Whatever it takes. Mom leaned forward. And us? How do we fix what we broke? I thought about all the family dinners, all the subtle jabs, all the attempts to change me into their version of success. Come see what I actually do, I said. Not what you imagine I do. Come to the warehouses. Learn about my world. Stop being ashamed of honest work. The next month wrought changes no one could have predicted. Michael traded his Rolex for a safety vest, learning logistics from the ground up. Mom started volunteering at our workforce development program, helping employees earn their GEDs. Dad became fascinated by our technology, often spending hours understanding our systems. The family dinners changed too. Now they were at my apartment above the warehouse, with conversations about real work, real challenges, real achievements. No more social climbing, no more status anxiety. One evening, As we watched trucks being loaded below, Mom asked, "Are you happy, Safia?" "Really happy." I looked at my family, finally seeing me, finally understanding what I'd built, and at the empire of motion I'd created. I always was Mom, moving things, solving problems, building something real. That's what I love. The money, the power, that was never the point. "We understand that now," Dad said. "Thanks for not giving up on us." Michael, fresh from his shift, joined us still wearing his safety vest. "Hey, sis, remember when I used to mock your pathetic warehouse job? Hard to forget. Today I learned how to optimize loading patterns for maximum efficiency. Actually, pretty amazing stuff." I smiled. "Welcome to my world, brother, where success isn't about looking important. It's about being important," he finished. "To the world, to the economy, to people who depend on us." Later that night, alone in my office, I looked at our family photo from Dad's retirement dinner, the last picture of us before everything changed. We looked perfect on the surface, wealthy, successful, proper, and completely fake. Now we were real. Michael was discovering the satisfaction of actual achievement. Mom was learning the value of meaningful work. Dad was seeing success through new eyes. And me, I was exactly who I'd always been. The warehouse manager who built an empire. The logistics expert who kept the world moving. The daughter who finally taught her family what success really means. My phone buzzed. A problem at the Chicago hub needed attention. I smiled, ready to tackle another real challenge in my embarrassing job. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about proving people wrong. It's about showing them a better way to be right. I stared at the elegantly set dinner table, watching steam rise from the perfectly arranged Sunday roast. The familiar scent of rosemary and thyme filled our family's dining room, but tonight something felt different, heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. "Emily, pass the potatoes," my father said without looking at me. His voice carried that stern edge I'd grown familiar with over the past few months. The one that suggested I was barely worth acknowledging. I was 32, single, and according to my family, the disappointment of our prestigious Williams lineage. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the last 6 years quietly building something they couldn't begin to understand. "Did you hear about Marcus?" my mother asked, her perfectly manicured hands gesturing toward my younger brother. "He just made junior partner at his law firm, youngest in the company's history." Marcus smirked from across the table. At 29, he'd always been the golden child, the one who followed the expected path: law school, prestigious firm, country club membership, everything our parents had mapped out. "That's wonderful," I said softly, taking a small bite of roast beef. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for signs of jealousy or resentment. I gave them neither. "Speaking of success," my father began, placing his fork down with deliberate slowness, "we need to discuss the house situation." My stomach tightened. I'd been waiting for this moment. 6 years ago, when I left my corporate job to start my own real estate investment company, they'd laughed, called it a phase, said I'd come crawling back when reality hit. Instead, I'd worked in silence, building a portfolio that now included 12 properties across 3 states. But they didn't know that. They thought I was barely surviving, living in the old family home out of their generosity. The same home my grandmother had left to me in her will, much to everyone's shock. "Emily," my father continued, his voice growing harder, "your mother and I have decided it's time for a change. Marcus needs a proper family home now that he's making partner. somewhere to start his own family. I took another small bite, chewing slowly. I see. Don't act dense, Marcus cut in. You've been living there rent-free for years. It's time someone responsible took over. Someone with a real career. My mother nodded in agreement. We've already spoken to the family lawyer. The house should have gone to your father anyway. Your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly when she made that will. The insult to my grandmother's memory stung more than their dismissal of me. She'd been the only one who saw me clearly, who understood why I spent weekends studying real estate markets instead of attending society functions. So, my father said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a document. We need you to sign this. It transfers ownership back to the family trust, where it belongs. I glanced at the paper but didn't reach for it. And if I don't? Marcus laughed sharply. Come on, Eam. You can barely afford groceries. How long do you think you can keep up the property taxes? The maintenance? The mortgage payments? If they'd bothered to check, they'd have known the mortgage was paid off 3 years ago. By me. But they never checked. Never asked. Never saw past their own assumptions. We're being generous, my mother added. We'll give you 3 months to find a new place. Maybe that little apartment complex on the east side. The one where your cleaning lady lives. The contempt in her voice made my teaspoon clink against china as I set it down. They'd never approved of Maria, who'd not only cleaned our family home for 20 years, but had become my first business partner, helping me identify undervalued properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods. The house belongs to me, I said quietly. Legally and morally. My father's face darkened. Then you leave us no choice. He stood up, his imposing frame casting a shadow across the table. Leave your keys and get out. This house belongs to the family now. We'll handle this through our lawyers. I looked at each of them in turn. My father, rigid with authority he'd assumed was absolute. My mother, lips pursed in disapproval she perfected over years. Marcus, practically glowing with anticipated victory. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my purse and pulled out my house keys. The same keys my grandmother had handed me on her deathbed, along with a whispered piece of advice. Sometimes silence is the best strategy. I placed them on the table with a soft clink. Thank you for dinner, I said, standing up. And for making this easier than I expected. Easier? Marcus scoffed. You're being kicked out. I smiled faintly. We'll see. As I walked to the door, my father called out, Don't bother trying to fight this, Emily. You can't afford the legal fees, and no bank will help you. I paused at the threshold, thinking about the documents waiting in my office. About the carefully orchestrated plan I'd set in motion the moment I heard whispers of their scheme 3 months ago. Good night, I said softly, and closed the door behind me. In my car, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to my lawyer. It's time. Execute tomorrow morning. Then I drove home, my home, and prepared for what would happen when the mortgage company called them at 9 a.m. sharp with news that would shatter their carefully constructed reality. Because while they'd been busy underestimating me, I'd been busy building an empire. And tomorrow, they'd learn exactly what their disappointment of a daughter had become. The next morning, I sat in my home office, watching the autumn sunlight filter through tall windows. The antique grandfather clock, another gift from my grandmother, showed 8:57 a.m. In exactly 3 minutes, my family would receive a call that would change everything. My phone buzzed. A message from Maria. They just pulled up in the driveway. Your father, mother, and Marcus. They look angry. I smiled, remembering the conversation I'd had with Highland Mortgage Corporation last week. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. At precisely 9:00 a.m., I heard the doorbell ring. Then aggressive knocking. "Emily!" My father's voice boomed through the door. "Open up immediately." I pressed the intercom button. "I'm in a meeting. Please wait in the parlor. Maria will let you in." I could practically hear my mother's disdain at being greeted by the housekeeper, but they had no choice. As they settled into the parlor, my phone lit up with an incoming call. "Robert Chen, Senior VP at Highland Mortgage." "Everything's proceeding as planned," he said. "I just spoke with your father. He wasn't pleased to learn about the transfer." "I imagine not," I replied calmly. "Thank you, Robert." I opened my laptop, checking my portfolio dashboard one last time. Everything was in place. 6 years of careful planning, of quiet acquisitions, of strategic patience, all leading to this moment. The parlor door burst open. My father stormed in, face flushed, waving his phone. "What is the meaning of this? The mortgage company says you've transferred the loan to your corporation? That you own not just this house but half the properties in the Heights district." Behind him, my mother clutched her designer handbag like a shield. Marcus looked less smug now, his lawyer's mind finally beginning to grasp the situation. I turned my laptop around, showing them the portfolio dashboard. "Would you like to sit down? This might take a while to explain." "Explain what?" Marcus snapped. "How you've been deceiving us." "No," I said quietly. "How you've been deceiving yourselves." I pulled up the first document, the original deed to our family home. "When grandmother left me this house, you all assumed I couldn't handle it, that I'd fail. What you didn't know was that she also left me her real estate investment guidelines, her strategies, her vision." My mother sank into a leather armchair, her composure cracking. "But you've been struggling. Working from home. No office, no employees." I clicked to the next screen. A satellite view of the Heights district, with properties highlighted in blue. "Those aren't signs of struggle, Mother. They're signs of strategy. Every property in blue belongs to Williams Capital Investment Group, my company." "Impossible," my father whispered. "That's nearly 40 properties." 47, I corrected, including the building where Marcus's law firm rents their top-floor office space. "I bought it through a subsidiary last year. Your rent helps fund my new acquisitions." Marcus collapsed into a chair, his face pale. "The merger meeting room. The one they suddenly renovated last month. My building manager mentioned you liked the changes," I said with a small smile. "I'm glad. I chose the design myself." My father's hands were shaking now. "The mortgage company said, they said you've paid off over $780,000. I finished for him." "Yes, 3 years ago. The house has been fully owned by my corporation since then. I just let you all believe otherwise because, well, it was simpler that way." "But how?" my mother demanded. "Where did you get the capital?" I thought about the nights I'd spent studying market trends, the weekends exploring emerging neighborhoods with Maria, the relationships I'd built with local business owners and developers, all while they assumed I was failing. "I started small," I explained. "Used my savings to buy a foreclosed duplex. Renovated it with Maria's help. Yes, Mother, our housekeeper is actually my business partner and owns 15% of the company. We flipped that property for triple the investment, then leveraged it for larger purchases." I pulled up another document, My company's current valuation. The number made my mother gasp. That's. She couldn't finish the sentence. More than the family trust? I supplied. Yes, significantly more. My father straightened his tie, his businessman instincts finally overriding his anger. Why tell us now? Why not sooner? Because you needed to show your true colors first, I said calmly. I wanted to see if you really try to take my home. The home grandmother trusted me with. And you did. I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the garden where I'd first dreamed of building something of my own. Now we can discuss new terms. You can continue living in the family properties. Yes, I own those too, but with formal lease agreements. Market rate rent. Professional terms. You charge your own family rent? My mother asked incredulously. The same way you were ready to make me homeless. I turned back to face them. Yes, business is business, isn't it, Father? That's what you always taught us. Marcus stood up, straightening his expensive suit. The family lawyers will already know. I cut him off. I hired them last year when I acquired their building. They work for me now, too. The silence that followed was deafening. Years of assumptions, of dismissals, of quiet condescension, all shattered in a single morning. My father was the first to speak again. What do you want? Respect, I said simply. Not as your daughter. You've made your feelings clear on that front. But as a businesswoman who's built something substantial, something real. I handed each of them a folder containing new lease agreements for their respective properties. You have until Friday to sign. After that, we can discuss alternative arrangements. And if we refuse, Marcus challenged, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. I smiled, remembering my grandmother's words about silence and strategy. Then I'll have to give my other tenants first right of refusal on those properties. I believe your law firm's competitors have been quite interested in that top-floor office space. As they left my office, folders clutched in shaking hands, I heard my mother whisper to my father, "Did you know? All this time, did you have any idea?" "No," he replied, sounding older than I'd ever heard him. "We never really looked." I sat back down at my desk, letting out a long breath. Maria appeared with a cup of tea, her special blend that had gotten me through countless late nights of planning. "They finally see you," she said, placing the cup beside me. I nodded, thinking about the long journey from that first small duplex to now. "They see the power," I corrected. "They don't see me yet, but maybe now they'll start looking." My phone buzzed with messages from other property owners in the Heights, eager to discuss acquisitions. The empire I'd built quietly was about to become very visible. But first, I had a company to run, tenants to meet, and a grandmother's legacy to honor. The family drama could wait. After all, I had all the time in the world now, and all the power too. 1 month after the confrontation in my office, I stood at the window of my newly opened headquarters in downtown Chicago. The entire top floor of the Morrison Building, another recent acquisition, offered a panoramic view of the city I'd slowly been reshaping. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Can we talk? Alone?" In the weeks since the revelation, my family had processed things differently. Mother had taken to calling daily, oscillating between apologetic reminiscence and thinly veiled attempts to understand my sudden success. Father had retreated into stoic silence, signing the lease agreements without comment. But Marcus had been suspiciously quiet. "Come by the office at 2, I texted back. Sarah, my executive assistant, appeared at my door. "The Henderson Group is here for the merger discussion." I nodded, straightening my blazer. Sent them in. The meeting went smoothly. They'd been trying to acquire one of my smaller properties for months. Now they were selling their entire portfolio to me instead. Funny how quickly things change when people realize who really holds the power. At precisely 2 p.m., Marcus arrived. He looked different. Less polished, more human somehow. The swagger was gone. "Nice office," he said, glancing around. "Better than my firm's." "Your firm's lease is up for renewal next month," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. "We should discuss that too." He sank into the chair across from my desk. "That's partly why I'm here. They're making cuts. The merger fell through after the clients learned about the ownership changes." I studied him carefully. And I'm being let go," he admitted. "Apparently, having your landlord as an estranged sister isn't great for business." I leaned back, letting the information settle. "What do you want, Marcus?" He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. "Understanding, I guess. How did you do it? All of it? Right under our noses?" I thought about all the family dinners I'd sat through, listening to them praise his accomplishments while dismissing mine. All the hints I'd dropped that they'd ignored. "I learned from grandmother," I said finally. "Not just about real estate, but about patience. About letting people underestimate you while you build something undeniable." "She always said you were different," he murmured. "Special, I just thought." "You thought she was being kind to the failing granddaughter," I finished. "Everyone did. That was useful." I opened my laptop, pulling up a document I'd prepared weeks ago, waiting for this moment. "Your firm isn't failing because of our family drama," I told him. "It's failing because their business model is outdated. Their client acquisition strategy is weak, and their market analysis is surface level at best." He blinked. "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been studying them for years, just like I study every tenant, every competitor, every potential opportunity." I turned the laptop toward him. "This is a preliminary analysis of where they're bleeding money and how to fix it." "Why show me this?" "Because I'm offering you a job," I said simply. "Not out of family obligation, but because you're smart when you're not blinded by ego. I need someone to head our legal department as we expand into new markets." The shock on his face was almost comical. "You want me to work for you?" "With me," I corrected, "as an equal partner in the legal side of the business. But understand something. This isn't about family. This is business. You'll earn your place, or you'll lose it, just like anyone else." He stared at the contract I placed before him. "Does Father know about this offer?" "Father doesn't make my business decisions anymore," I replied. "Neither does Mother, or anyone else. That's the first lesson you'll need to learn if you accept." Marcus picked up the contract, reading it carefully. His lawyer's instincts hadn't completely abandoned him. "The salary is less than I make now," he noted. "The base salary is," I agreed. "But the equity compensation is significantly higher. Another lesson. Build ownership, not just income." A small smile tugged at his lips. "Grandmother taught you that too, among other things." I stood, walking to the window again. "She taught me that real power isn't in what you show people. It's in what you build while they're not looking." He signed the contract without further negotiation, another first. As he left my office, he paused at the door. "I'm sorry, Emily, for everything." "I know," I said quietly. "Now prove it by helping me build something even bigger." That evening, I visited grandmother's grave, placing fresh flowers beside her headstone. The autumn wind rustled through nearby trees as I sat on the small bench we'd often shared. "You were right," I said softly. "About everything. About letting them think what they wanted while I built what I needed. About patience being more powerful than pride." I told her about Marcus, about the expansion plans, about the empire that had grown from her initial lessons. I like to think she would have been proud, not just of the success, but of how I'd achieved it. My phone buzzed again. Mother, asking about Sunday dinner. This time, she suggested having it at my house. A small acknowledgement of the new reality. I texted back a simple yes. Let them come. Let them sit at my table, in my home, in my success. Let them finally see what had been there all along. A woman who turned their underestimation into an empire. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully. Sometimes the child they dismiss becomes the force they can't ignore. And sometimes, just sometimes, silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. I looked up at the darkening sky, feeling the weight of everything I'd built, everything I'd become. "Thank you, grandmother," I whispered, "for teaching me the power of being underestimated." Then I walked back to my car, ready to continue building, growing, leading. Not for them anymore. Never again for them. But for myself, and for every other person who's been told they're not enough. Because I wasn't just Emily anymore. I was the CEO of a real estate empire, the owner of half the city's prime properties, and living proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't in what you say. It's in what you build while they're not looking.